listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the college football betting odds preview for Thursday, December 19th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
All right, this is like a dog track. Here comes Rusty. It's the start of bowl season, and we come out of the gate with a couple of games on Friday. We get an afternoon game. Brian Blessing, Bruce Marshall, the legendary publication, The Gold Sheet. We're in Las Vegas. We'll do Friday, Saturday bowl games, and we'll take you right through bowl season back early next week and start to look ahead. But Bruce, when we get to bowl season, before we dive into specifics, it is quite the Rubik's Cube. There are some things that are easy to figure out. There are many that are gray areas and hard to figure out. I mean, the one thing would be, okay, neutral field, but then you got to take into account who's going to travel and then who is going to play. We've seen suspensions in the Oklahoma game. We've got players that are going to sit out because they don't want to get hurt, and maybe that's certainly understandable. You got coaches, some are walking out the door. There's a million things to take into account when you get to bowl season.
There is, Brian, and the weird thing is there's been a million different sets of results in the years past when you've gotten these sorts of things. I can remember back the first time player suspensions in bowls, and this was Lou Holtz suspended his top running backs, Michael Forrest and Ben Cowens, for the Orange Bowl game against Oklahoma in Jan 1, 1978. Oklahoma wins that. It's going to end up winning the national title. And the point spread went up, and everybody thought this is done for Arkansas. Well, running back named Roland Sales came in, had the game of his life, and Arkansas wins 31-6. So the unexpected often happens in these games. That's what makes it harder, Brian, because you've seen results all across the board. Sometimes it makes a difference for guys to get suspended. Sometimes it makes a difference when a coach leaves. Sometimes it doesn't. And the disparate efforts from you get from teams in the bowls also mean something. And the other thing we look at are conferences too, and how they perform. And in recent years, there have been a couple. One in particular that's been in the last few years that's been the worst and surprisingly so, and really bad. So if you watch the early bowl games to see if a trend like that might continue.
Oh, I would even say, but you could go inside the inside of some suspensions. You get the word, he's going to be out. He's suspended. You could get he's going to be suspended at the start of the game. What does that mean? Is that a series? Is that a half?
You're right, and it can certainly be different. And the coaches' things too. I mean, because a coach is leaving, we were going to talk about one of those in just a minute, but that's not always foolproof either. We remember last year when Paul Johnson was leaving Georgia Tech, and this was supposed to be his testimonial game in the bowl game in Detroit against Minnesota, and Georgia Tech just didn't show up at all. So it's you
want the famous one. I mean, how about a small program or smallish league? I mean, you got a year, right? It was Northern. Was it Northern Illinois? Northern Illinois makes the Orange Bowl.
Yeah,
and the coach bolts. I mean, it's like the opportunity of a lifetime, and these poor kids get thrown to the wolves. Yes,
and here's Memphis this year. I mean, Mike Norvell is left. We'll talk about them later on in the bowl season. But it happens. It happens like that, and we'll just have to wait and see.
All right, let's go. Friday, and it's an afternoon game on Friday, and that's Buffalo and Charlotte in the Bahamas Bowl. Buffalo, a 6.5-point favorite. Total on the game, 51.5 or 52. This is a Buffalo team, can run the football with authority. Love the coach. And you got a pair of teams here, Bruce, with 7-5 records. And listen, every game's a snowflake. But unless the winds are howling in past years, my recollection is they're down there basking in the glow of the sunshine, and these are high-scoring games.
Yes, I mean the famous one was the first Bahamas Bowl, that Central Michigan, Western Kentucky, when Central almost came back from a 49-14 deficit in the fourth quarter and ended up scoring on an 80-yard play on the last play of the game.
I remember that like it was yesterday.
Yeah, and even last year we had a pretty wild one with Kent State and Toledo. So we'll see what happens in this one. Check the weather. There might be some weather down there tomorrow, though. It might be a little wet. Total has dropped some here. The one thing about here is seeing Charlotte in a bowl. There's a lot of people I've talked to who didn't even know Charlotte played football, but they do. They're in Conference USA, and they just got the program going a few years ago. They changed coaches this year. Will Healy, a young guy, came in his early 30s to take over for Brad Lambert. And this team got hot down the stretch. They celebrated getting bowl eligible against Marshall like they were at Times Square on New Year's Eve. I mean, they turned their locker room into a discotheque. It was unbelievable. And I thought they were going to come up flat for their subsequent game. And in the last game of the regular season against Old Dominion, and they didn't. They ended up winning that game and covering, and they've been pretty good down the stretch. They won their last 5. They've got a good dual threat quarterback in Reynolds. But I like the Buffalo equation here a bit more. Lance Leopold, and I don't know why he keeps getting bypassed for some of these jobs. Maybe there still might be some movement, and I think Leopold should be high on everyone's list, considering how much he won at Whitewater, Wisconsin, how much he's won at Buffalo here. Those running backs are good. You mentioned Patterson and Marks. They can you got 2,000-yard backs. I mean, that's and Patterson was well over 1,000. And
he knows what he's doing, Bruce. In fact,
yep.
I just read this yesterday. Yesterday they had an incredible recruiting class. Signed 14 kids. They got a quarterback in the offing. Really stepped up to the plate because it's a senior-laden offensive line, so he's replenishing the offensive line. The guy just flat out knows what he's doing. I would say this: if the weather's not an issue, you have the 128th ranked defense in the country in Charlotte. I do like points in the game. Again, the weather would be the lone concern. The one thing that you should take into account, though, historically, the MAC is brutal in bowls. 14-46 straight up, 20-40-2 against the spread. That's a red flag.
That is a red flag, and Buffalo last year couldn't do it either in its bowl game against Troy. So we'll see. We gave them a shot here, 34-23. It's also they're the rare MAC team that plays some defense. They were well ahead of the rest of the MAC in defense. So I think that'll hold them up in good stead in this one. And you talk about a bowl newcomer. I mean, Charlotte fits that description to a T.
Right. Highly motivated. They're going to love being there. There's no getting around it. All right. We go to the Frisco Bowl, but not San Francisco, Frisco, Texas. And that's Kent State, Utah State. And we're looking at the Aggies, a 6.5-point favorite here. Totals up there at 67 or 67.5. Again, we got it right. Would this impact at all, Bruce, belief as you're watching the Buffalo game? If Buffalo's spitting the bit, I like Utah State for starters. I just flat out like Utah State. They're the better football team. And we'll put it this way. Would you envision a scenario where, as the Buffalo game's being played, if Charlotte were to be stepping on their neck, could you see this number run big time Utah State's way because the MAC's been a dog's breakfast?
Yes, I think so, because it's the cow's out of the barn there. People know about that. At least the people serious about this who would be betting this sort of game, and they know you can kind of look against the MAC, and that's been a profitable way to go. So yes, I think it might. And
MAC's bad. Mountain West has been actually pretty good.
Right. And, we'll see. Utah State was in the first day bowl last year against North Texas and looked really good. Now, there's a rub. Utah State was a little bit of a disappointment this year, and there have been some distractions this week. They had Is there running back out of this game? I don't think they've suspended anybody for the marijuana arrest, and that was including the quarterback, Jordan Love. Who does not, it was a very minor offense, but given that this is Utah, I mean, if this is BYU, he would have
That's a great point.
Would have been thrown out of the state, but I mean, Utah State apparently, no disciplinary yet, at least as far as this game from what we've heard. listen, Jordan Love, the quarterback, he was the top from the summer at the Manning Passing Academy. He was the number 1 rated quarterback there. He's going to get drafted, and he's going to be he'll have a decent shot to do something in the NFL. But I did think Utah State was a bit disappointing this year. Gary Anderson came back, the old coach who was there before Matt Wells took over. Of course, Anderson went to Wisconsin, then to Oregon State, left him in mysterious circumstances. He was strangely disconnected this year, I thought. And the 7-5 record for Utah State's about bottom line considering their schedule this year. They did play LSU, so I can't fault them for that. But too many times this year, they just didn't show up. But I'm not sure how Kent State is. This team, Brian, in early November, we didn't think this team was going to a bowl. They're sitting there at 3-6. It's another bad year at Kent State. But the way the bowl system is now, you can win 3 straight in the MAC down the stretch, and you can get to a bowl game. They did switch quarterbacks during the season when Crum came in, and he came in late in the season and actually played pretty well and sparked this offense. They can run some. Sean Lewis, the coach, came from Dino Baber's staff at Syracuse, so he's a spread devotee, but they do like to run the ball some out of that. So this is might be interesting. If everything is in order, points, 42-30, Utah State, our score forecast, we did lean that way. I think they're the better team. But there were too many times this team didn't show up this year, and I'm a little not so high on this pick, but I think they are probably the better team.
All right, how's this for an oddity? And you get the last game Friday is MAC versus Mountain West, and so is the game we're going to talk about, the first game on Saturday. Again, MAC versus Mountain West with Central Michigan, 8-5 straight up, 8-4 against the spread. San Diego State 9-3, 7-4 against the spread. Just check they're actually catching a break. It's 40 degrees is the high today and tomorrow, but Saturday it's going to be a balmy 53 and sunny. The total is only 40.5, Bruce. Honestly, how do you not lean to the under, which is, San Diego State's defense and a plotty offense, and I've seen Central Michigan run really hot and cold this year.
Yep, and San Diego State has got that under trend. It was 11-1 this year. They were under in that bowl. They got shut out in their bowl game last year against Ohio U, by the way, another MAC team. Pretty good one last year, and that was in Frisco last year. So here we are in Albuquerque, San Diego State on a 12-1 under run. You mentioned the weather because you have to for this game. I mean, they have had some very bone-chilling games there, and I've been to Albuquerque at this time of year, and I saw the wind there once sway those light standards at that stadium like they were going to fall over. I mean, it's awful. I mean, but the forecast is actually pretty good. I mean, 53, right? 53 for Central Michigan's it's like them going to the Bahamas Bowl. Yes, and you wonder how the Aztecs will react to all this. But for Albuquerque standards, it won't be too bad. But for the past, we have to sort of mention that for this game. But the Aztecs, it was. Boy, this is it ended up looking much the same as last year for them down the stretch. And even though Rocky, his version of the spread didn't look much different than his old offense because they were still running the same plays, the same sequence, trying to run the ball. Agnew, the quarterback, has limitations. I mean, the scores down the stretch they had the last game, they did beat BYU 13-3. The game against Hawaii, 14-11. Fresno, 17-7. Nevada, they lose 17-13. There you go, under. So we'll see if Central can do something. They did cover it 9 of their last 11, although the one they didn't was a big downer for the Chips against Miami-O in the Mid-American Championship game at Ford Field. Dormady, the transfer quarterback from Tennessee, was generally a plus for them this season. They were able to make chunk plays on offense. They can run the ball pretty well, and it's a coach, Jim McElwain, who came in after that bad adventure at Florida, but he has rehabilitated himself pretty darn well. And I got Central to a bowl. Of course, he had been in the Mountain West at one point at Colorado State, and he had faced Rocky Long before. One last note, Rocky Long is going back home here. He is a New Mexico grad, and he coached at New Mexico for 10 years. So for him, at least, it'd be kind of a cool game. But his team just doesn't do enough. 20-17, we're taking Central Michigan here. We're going to look under because that's what you do in San Diego State games.
All right, let's go to the Cure Bowl in Orlando with Liberty against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern, 4.5 point favorites. Total in the game is 58.5. I do like points in the game. And Bruce, the one thing, Liberty's first bowl game ever, as you alluded to, like just the way Charlotte was all jacked to get there. This is a team that's got to be doing a cartwheel to be playing in this game.
Oh, yeah, and this is big, and I don't know. Jerry Falwell Jr., maybe he's going to shave his beard because they're into a bowl here. We'll see, because that's a big deal for Liberty. And there's a lot of people that I talked to back there who think that there is tremendous upside for this program there in Lynchburg, and it could be sort of become like the BYU of the region there. And this is really big for them to come up with a game. It's a beautiful campus there. They've got a nice stadium, which they can expand, and they're moving pretty good. Now, and interestingly here, I think they've got the right coach. Now, they liked their coach before in Turner Gill, but he had to leave and because his wife became ill, and Hugh Freeze comes in. It's appropriate in the Cure Bowl here because he needed a cure at the start of the year. He was he coached the first couple of games from a hospital bed. He was dealing with a staph infection, and it was kind of serious. But he's recovered. His quarterback, I love his name, Buckshot Calvert, comes in. He can wing the ball around. Now, I will say this, though. This team, though, your point well taken about maybe some points here. This is a Liberty team that couldn't stop Rutgers when it played
right.
Rutgers. Now, they can score, but Rutgers put up 44 on them. Virginia put up 55. That's not the most explosive offense in the world.
Exactly.
So you could see Georgia Southern with its option, and this is an interesting option here because they put up points with Shea Wirtz at quarterback, and they put up some points this year, and they run that option, and it's hard to stop. But we think Liberty's got a shot. I think actually over might be the best call here. 35-34. We took Liberty to win this one in a mild upset, but over the points is what we're thinking, over the total in Orlando, the first of 3 bowl games here in Orlando this bowl season.
Let's make some money tonight.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. All right, sir, we move on to the Boca Raton Bowl. And as we sit here and stare at SMU taking on Florida Atlantic, basically what we should just be saying is it's SMU at Florida Atlantic, laying 3 points on the road, and the total on the game is 70. Florida Atlantic's played in this game. Florida Atlantic knows how to win this game, but we've got the big coaching caveat to discuss.
Yes, and this is one of those extra interesting things because Lane Kiffin has left after the regular season or through the conference championship game, which Florida Atlantic won big on this field. It's home field. He's being replaced for this game only by the offensive line coach Glenn Spencer. They have named Willie Taggart, the former Florida State, and before that, Oregon, South Florida, Western Kentucky coach, as the successor. He doesn't take over until after the game. So this is a little different than some of those situations where, the coach is being promoted from within. They're going outside to find their coach. So I don't know. And the track record and how these things have fared over the years is split right about down the middle. So there's not much historically as far as prediction wise to be gleaned from what's happened in the past. What we do know is that both these teams can score, and certainly that's the case with SMU. Pony scored 43 points per game. Sonny Dykes finally found the quarterback that he wanted to run his version of the air raid, and that was Shane Buechele, who had been at Texas and had lost the job there to Sam Ehlinger, and he shows up here in Dallas, and he ends up putting up some big numbers for the Ponies this year, and they were sitting in pretty good shape and thinking they might be the team out of the New Year's Six into the New Year's Six before they lost a couple games late in the season. But they really have offense here. Buechele ended up throwing 33 touchdown passes. They've got a 1,000-yard rusher in Xavier Jones. But, you're going up against Florida Atlantic, very well designed here as well. It's still the same. I don't think they're going to miss Kiffin too much for this game because he's leaving behind everything pretty much the same. Quarterback Chris Robinson really turned into a great leader for this team. 26-8 TD pass interception ratio this year. They use their tight end a lot. Harrison Bryant caught 65 passes. He will probably be playing down the road in the NFL. And Malcolm Davidson, a freshman from up the road in Kissimmee, where my daughter lives, over 700 yards as a freshman running back. So they can do some things, and they're at home here. And SMU did kind of cool off late in the season. So we took Florida Atlantic in what could be a very interesting game, 38-34. This one, and we're talking about a lot of points in that Kent State-Utah State game. This one, though, might be as explosive as any game we see in the postseason here.
All right, Bruce, let's move to the Camellia Bowl, and this is in Montgomery, Alabama, and we talked about the weather in Albuquerque. This ain't no garden spot either. It's going to be 51 degrees and raining, and the bottom line is here, I wouldn't go near this game with monopoly money. Both teams, Florida International 6-6, 4-7 against the spread. Arkansas State is 7-5 straight up, 5-6 against the spread. They are 1-4 straight up and against the spread in their last. I think they're the better team, but they're 1-4 straight up and against the spread in their last 5 bowl games. And in the last 3 years in the regular season, 2-12 record against teams that actually went to bowls. I'm going to be Scotty Bowman on the bench. You're Guy LaFleur. I'm tapping you. Get in there. This one's all you, because I wouldn't go near this with your money.
Yeah, well, I was going to defer to you here too, but
nope. I called it first. Dibs.
Okay, you got it. You got it. The one thing I would say about this game is that if Florida International was a disappointment this year, and it took them a while to get bowl eligible, and they barely got there at 6-6. And this is a team that really impressed last year, and they're also great against the number. They were 10-3 against the spread last year. Butch Davis has won bowl games in the past. He's won them at Miami. He's won them at North Carolina, and I think he's got it. And he won last year with these guys. In fact, it's the third straight year he's taken FIU to a bowl, which is his tenure there in Miami. So this is pretty good to what he's done there with the Golden Panthers, and they vote for a veteran coach to come in and stabilize a program like this. The last 2 games of the regular season, though, were pretty impressive. They should have beaten Marshall, which is a dangerous team, and we'll be playing on Monday. We'll talk about that next week in its bowl game. But the game before that against the Miami Hurricanes, a game played at the Marlins Stadium in Miami there. Really impressive game. They out-hit Miami, and they outplayed the Canes, and they were a 3-touchdown underdog, and darn it if they didn't win the game, 30-24. So it looks like they are hitting the bowls in pretty good shape. Morgan, the quarterback, missed some of the year for injuries, and he also missed the bowl game last year, which they won against Toledo. But he's back and played well at the end of the season. Couple of running backs, Jones and Maxwell, pretty good. I wasn't that impressed with Arkansas State this year, even though they came in, and I felt for them at the start, especially Blake Anderson, the coach. I mean, he had to miss some time. His wife passed sadly earlier in the season, and they did come into UNLV and win, but they were kind of erratic in a Sun Belt that wasn't all that deep this year. And they're a very pass-happy offense, but Florida International saw a lot of those in Conference USA. 35-31, that might be a bit aggressive on the score considering the weather report, which suggests rain, like you were saying. But we made a small case for Florida International here. Let's see what happens.
All right, Bruce. In Las Vegas, we've got the Vegas Bowl. And as we speak, I'm outside. You're inside. We're both in Vegas. I'm a box of rocks. I do this on my patio. Full disclosure, it's currently 41 degrees. I am bundled up like I just got shipped to Ice Station Zebra. On Saturday, the days are nice, though. Morning and night, it's freezing, and the days are nice. So I think it's in the mid-50s, and it's Sunday. The one thing you can get are windy conditions out at Sam Boyd Stadium. The game has several subplots to it, with Washington against Boise State. Washington laying 3.5. Total on the game is 50. I can make a case for both sides in this game with Chris Petersen going against his old team. The rub is they're a Pac-12 team, and Boise State has owned this bowl in a weird way. The one thing is their fan base will travel to it. it's still Vegas, and you get to have time and fun in Vegas. But the oddity of it is, to me, I don't know, is it any great reward for Boise State, who comes here all the time? It's a weird dynamic. And to me, with all these things in gray areas, when in doubt, I think I'm taking the points, but there are cases for both teams.
Yeah, there are, and you're right about Cold. I saw you on the camera. I thought Patrick McGowan was going to come behind you.
Ernest Borgnine.
Ernest Borgnine, Station Zebra. There you go. But
the funny thing is, you and I just say that, rattles off the tongue, and our friends Mike and Darren, who put this together, they're probably looking at each other. What did they say? And probably the people that ultimately listen to this go, what the hell are those two guys talking about?
Our friend Mike Palm likes to tease me when I go on VSiN about how old I am. And I said, well, I did date Rita Hayworth once. So there was.
Well, and your social security number is 17.
Yeah, there's a benefit to being older, I guess. But this one, there's a lot of moving pieces here, Brian. You mentioned some of that. We'll get to that Pac-12 thing in a moment, because I think that ends up being what determines this game for us. But more landmarks than usual for this game. It's the last of an era here at Sam Boyd Stadium, which will be closed after this. And
the format for this bowl is going to change. Yes. I mean, all of a sudden it's going to be a jump up in quality competition in years to come.
Yep. They're moving to the Raiders' new stadium, the Allegiant Stadium, next year. The Mountain West is not being invited along. The bowl is instead deciding to keep its affiliation with the Pac-12 against new rotating foes from the Big Ten and SEC. My thought is, one, just quick interject, if Orlando can have 3 bowl games, Vegas can have 2. And I would hope the Mountain West could call it the Silver Bowl, play it in the new stadium. But
that makes, doesn't it? It makes complete sense, doesn't it? In time?
Sure. And the Mountain West is being dissed again here. But so there's intrigue on that front also. This game would have been intriguing just to pit Chris Petersen against his former employer, Boise, but added another wrinkle with Petersen announcing he was stepping down at the end of the regular season. They are promoting from within. Jimmy Lake, the defensive coordinator, will take over, but not for this bowl. It's still Petersen. And that's an important thing, at least the last couple of weeks, because we saw all the recruiting stuff yesterday. And this was a pretty heavy recruiting period the last week and a half, 2 weeks for the head coaches. But Petersen sent Lake out to do all that. And Petersen was able to game plan and do normal coaching things at a time when most head coaches aren't able to do that. So maybe that'll be a plus for them here or not. We will see. I do know this about Washington this year. This was a disappointing year. They were expecting a lot more than 7-5. They didn't think they'd be ending the year here in Vegas. And I saw this early in September. They lost that game to Cal. That was the lightning delay game. The last play didn't end about 2 a.m. that game, but they lost that one. When I was up at Stanford watching that game, and I work on Stanford's pregame show, and we're out there doing in KNBR, and I talked to some Washington people, because we do it out at everybody tailgates. So I'm running into some Washington people, and some of them told me, they said, we're a little concerned about Jacob Eason, because all we're hearing all of a sudden is how he's thinking about coming out early to the NFL. They thought it might be a distraction. They proved, I think, correct, because his efforts were pretty erratic. They were certainly bad that night against Stanford. Washington looked poor and lost. You can blame his lack of top-notch receivers for perhaps some of his inconsistency this year, but his numbers, 2,900 yards passing, 22 touchdown passes were good, but not great. I mean, Washington people were thinking this guy might contend for the Heisman coming into the year, transferring from Georgia, being a ballyhooed recruit from the Seattle area. And I think my feeling is, and people up there think he will jump to the NFL. He's going to play in this game. I don't think he wants to stick around another year. He's using this as sort of a springboard for him to get in the NFL, whatever. Washington was erratic this year. Defense was down in a couple notches. They lost everybody from last year. And Boise plays, like you said, in these games in Sam Boyd. They've won 4 of these since 2011. They've beaten UNLV 3 times here on this very field, including back in October. Brian Harson's got 2 quarterbacks he can use now, because Bachmeier, his original starter, is available again. But Henderson turned into a really nice find for him in November, and the games that Boise won down the stretch. We took Boise 30-27. I promised this about the Pac-12. 3-18-1 against the number of the last 3 years. Now, Washington did get the one Pac-12 cover last year, but that was way in the back door against Ohio State. A game they were getting roundly outplayed until Ohio State sat in the lead until late. But the Pac-12 has been a go-against big time in recent years, and that's why we're taking Boise 30-27 in this one.
All right, Bruce, and we will wrap it up on Saturday with the New Orleans Bowl with UAB against Appalachian State. And the number, I just don't think it's big enough. It was 17.5. It's been sharp money's knocked this down to 16.5. I'm just not buying that move in any way, shape, or form. The total in the game is 48. UAB is a remarkable story. This is a program that was gone, came back. Hats off to them for doing this and getting back in short order. App State, if the motivation thing would be the only concern, because this was a team, one loss, stubbed their toe, or who knows where they'd be playing. So it is a concern. But in terms of it being a program that is just really heading the right way, and you know what, Bruce? I'll just give you the determining factor for me, and there's no reason to overthink this. Yeah, maybe it was an eternity ago, but if UAB, who's playing in a bowl, could only beat Akron by 13, they shouldn't be on the same field with Appalachian State. I think this is Woodshed City.
Well, it could be. And I think and we thought that way too, Brian, the only thing I think that's causing some UAB money to show up here is that historically, the early bowls and the combination of that underdog, a bigger underdog beyond 2TD underdog have been a pretty good percentage play throughout the year. So historically, this has been a good bowl underdog spot at these biggest spreads, because none of these bowl teams are bad. I mean, you're not getting in 2 and 10 teams playing in bowls. Even the modest bowl teams are still decent. So got to keep that in mind. A couple of thoughts here. One, App State's coach, here we go again. Eli Drinkwitz has taken the Missouri job. So he is out of there. And they have already promoted from within. Sean Clark, assistant coach, will be taken over. This is now 2 years in a row that App has lost a coach. You talk about a nice proving ground for a coach. It was Scott Satterfield, and a couple of years before that, it was Willie Fritz who left for Tulane, and Satterfield, of course, went to Louisville. So this has kind of supplanted Arkansas State, which used to be sending all those coaches like Freeze and Harsin and Malzahn to other jobs. Now it's App State doing it. But you're right, this is a special team this year. We'll get to them in a second. The UAB story is great, but there are a couple of things to note about UAB. UAB is very carefully scheduled here since it resumed playing in 2017. And the story is great, but they have made sure to downgrade the non-conference schedule. They need one payday assignment a year, and they wait until November to play an SEC team. And that's been their bowl. That has been their payday. And they have lost those games resoundingly, though, the last few years. And they lost this year. They lost this year as well at Tennessee pretty big in November. So I'm wondering about them really stepping up. They did not close the season well. Their quarterback Johnston was hurt. The true freshman Hopkins came in and took over for Johnston, who actually came in a little bit in the final game against Florida Atlantic and did not look good. They put Johnston in the lineup last year in their bowl game. They actually won that one against Northern Illinois. But this team looks like it could be outmanned here. And you mentioned how good App is, and Thomas, the quarterback. This is a really high-powered spread, can score a lot of points, almost 40 per game. And they've also been good against the number. They were 9-4 this year. That's 22-7-1 since late in the 2017 season. That's pretty darn good. 38-14 App State. Like you, we thought we will take the Mountaineers here. Just not sure UAB is really bowl quality this year.
All right, there's a look at the very beginning stages of bowl season with Bruce Marshall. We'll dive back in with you early next week and start looking ahead, because, Bruce, we're going to be treated to football basically every day now for quite a while.
Yeah, we get a couple of weeks of this stuff. It's starting a little later this year, but it goes a little later as well. And through even past New Year's, there's games this year. So, yeah, lots of college football in the next few weeks.
He's Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet. I'm Brian Blessing. Glad you're with us, and best of luck in bowl season as we kick things off.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
Well, Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At betmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling, an approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.